Turning now to President Obama's trip overseas, where he wrapped up the G8 summit, then capped off his last day in Italy with an audience with the Pope. Then it was on to Africa, where the first family has just arrived in Ghana, their last stop before returning home. We began our coverage where the day began. NBC's chief White House correspondent Chuck Todd reports from Rome.
The final summit gathering included more than 24 leaders in addition to the G8 powers, suggesting this group has outgrown itself.
Everybody wants the smallest possible group, smallest possible organization that includes them.
This is Mr. Obama's 5th summit, and his presidency isn't even 6 months old. But he says they're still necessary because the United Nations has dropped the ball.
There's a sense that when it comes to big, tough problems, the UN General Assembly is not always working as effectively and rapidly as it needs to.
So the president called this summit highly productive, despite the fact most of the accomplishments were simply pledges on climate change, Iran, nuclear proliferation, securing loose nukes, economic stimulus. Finally, the president credited his own personal intervention for the member nations' decision to increase food aid for poorer nations, mostly in Africa, from $15 billion to $20 billion.
When my father traveled to the United States from Kenya to study, at that time the per capita income and gross domestic product of Kenya was higher than South Korea's. Today, obviously, South Korea is a highly developed and relatively wealthy country, and Kenya is still struggling.
He said with comprehensive planning, African countries can match that prosperity, but he didn't shy away from gently admonishing the African leaders on what needs to change.
In many African countries, if you want to start a business or get a job, you still have to pay a bribe.
But it was not quite goodbye from Italy.
Arrivederci.
He had one final stop, the Vatican.
For any president, meeting the Pope is one of those win in Rome opportunities. Politically, though, for Mr. Obama, it's a chance for him to connect to the 1 in 4 Americans who are Catholic.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor for me.
They began with a face-to-face conversation in their official roles. Then the first family and senior staff members joined the president.
His brother is a priest.
For a traditional audience and blessing from Pope Benedict XVI. Chuck Todd, NBC News, traveling with the president in Rome.